Pick your nose.
One person just logged on and logged back on. You should probably hurry up.
Did it crash yet?
No.
No.
One person logged on and logged back on.
Where was it show that? Oh. Hello, everyone. Is anyone out there? Can I get like a wave or something? I've never done one of these before, so I can't actually tell whether the two little person icon there on the corner means something or not. Are you about to check? No?
Check what?
Never mind.
I can't check.
So the thing is, there's two, and I don't know whether that's because I logged into it from another browser.
Well, one disappeared and came back.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Let's see here. Anything we do breaks it. Okay, so we're going to get started here in another 2 or 3 minutes. So if you're already out there watching, just hang on, and we will see if anybody shows up. If you already have any questions or discussion points. Hi, Caitlin or Bruce. Is the sound okay? I've never done one of these before, and we tested it a little bit earlier, but you know, that was just from like my computer to my wife's phone. Can you hear me okay? Samantha, are you, so is it Reynolds or Hendrickson? Like, which is, it's Reynolds, right? And Hendrickson's a previous name? Okay, okay. So I had it backwards. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. As I put in the message, this isn't a required thing. So, you know, whenever you guys need to step out, just let me know, and we'll do that. I only had a couple of things that I was going to hit on, and but I figured I'd start with like, what are any questions or concerns or pieces of confusion this far in the class that that you might have that I can address before I hit on the couple of things that I wanted to talk about. And we will save this, and I'll post the link to the Blackboard for anyone who didn't make it. Anything? Okay, so while you think that over, I'm going to talk a little bit about workshops. And I'm trying to remember which groups you were in. Were you both in group one? Or I'm pretty sure Samantha was in group one. I can't remember, Caitlin, which one you were in. But so if you were taking this class in the classroom, which I have to admit I think is the superior way to take the class, the way that the workshops would probably be conducted is that during the week of a workshop, those workshops would be the only thing that would take place in class. So you would be in a group of 3 or 4 people. Excuse me. You would be in a group of 3 or 4 people, and you would actually bring your paper to class. You're in group 4. Okay. So you would bring your paper to class, and in any given hour, you would have 1 or maybe 2 papers that you would work on. So everyone would sit down together, they would read over the paper, and then you would basically just start having a discussion, asking questions about it. Hey, on page 2, I noticed that you did this. I didn't really follow what the point was of that. Could you explain it to me? And then the person who wrote the paper would spend a couple of minutes talking about that. Or someone might have a question. Hey, I didn't understand this. What was going on? The person who wrote it might explain, well, I was trying to do this. The person who asked the question might be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know, looking at it now, I should have gotten that. Or they might be like, well, you know, that's not clear in the paper. Maybe you should revise that or whatever. So each paper would end up getting, you know, between 20 and 40 minutes of like intense conversation and discussion that would focus on that paper. And then at the end of the workshop, either at the end of the workshop period, like that, literally that class session, you might sit down and write a letter, or the way that I have seen it and that I've preferred is that at the very end of the total workshop, you would have a letter for everyone in your group. So the workshop itself, and you guys mind? My cats are fighting. At the end of the workshop group, or at the end of the workshop class, that really threw me off. Okay, so the two things are very different. And what we're trying to duplicate here in the online version of the class is we're trying to duplicate that conversational environment where you ask questions and there's some back and forth and you brainstorm and help come up with ways to sort things out. And then also there's the letter where you have a more formal, not off the cuff, but really sitting down and thinking about it. You know, if I had to tell this person this specific thing, you know, if I had to assess the paper, basically, if I was doing a book report on this paper, here's the things I might say about it. So they're two very different things. In the past, what I've seen happen was that it's hard to get groups to really understand how the workshop is supposed to be in the first group. So I sort of give some, you know, basically I give a lot more points on the first workshop than I do on future ones, just sort of expecting people to not really get it. And what I've seen in the past is that people will, instead of having short little like question type discussions, they will basically write their letter and then they won't participate anymore. And then they'll copy and paste their letter into a letter later and think that that's both. And the fact of the matter is they're two very different events. You can expect during a normal week of class to spend 3 hours of actual like sitting down talking about the papers in class as part of the workshop. And then in a completely separate event, writing the paper. So we had one group that had, during the course of the week on the memoir, they had about 100 total posts. And that was a really good, really effective workshop. I felt like people gave each other very good feedback, and it was good. The other groups didn't have people participating very much. We had one group that I think had a total of like 20 posts, and that included the papers. And it was simply not enough participation for anyone who was involved in those workshop groups to get really any kind of constructive feedback from their peers. And unfortunately, you know, I don't have time to spend an hour per paper. I would love to. That would be great. But can't do that. And I don't have time to sit down face to face with each person for an hour and talk through every paper. So, you know, I read the papers, I read them closely, I make comments on them and stuff. But the way this course is designed, without that workshop participation, the extensive, hey, I didn't get this, you know, or hey, I did get this, I thought that was really neat, I wish you'd done more with it, or I felt like you were trying to do this, but I just didn't get it. Without all that taking place in the forums, you're not getting what you need to get. Yeah, were you the one that emailed me about that? Or what I would do is I would basically, how do I say it? Okay, what I would do is I would sit down with that rubric that I gave you at the beginning of the first workshop. If you remember, I gave you a 14 question, I think it was 14 question template that you could go through and you could answer the questions about the paper. And I would take that and I would take each paper and I would work through that and fill it out. And on the first day, on Monday, I would post one of those comments in a question form for each of the papers. And if people start responding, then I would let the conversation go on as normal, and I would just participate and go on with the conversation. If I ended up in a group where people were not participating, on the second day, I would take another one of those answers and I would post it for each of the papers. So what you've done is you sat down, you did the reading, you answered the questions, you have everything ready to go. And if they participate, you're ready to have a good conversation. And if they don't participate, all you do is every day you log in, you're like, oh, look, they're still not doing anything. And you copy and paste something from that template, put it in, you've made a new post. By the time it's done, you've made 5 posts. If you do it on Saturday as well, 6 posts per paper. You haven't done any extra work because it's just copying and pasting from the thing that you did on the first day. But you have, at that point, just yourself made 24 posts, been ignored, and gotten full credit for the assignment. Does that help? That's my recommendation. That's the way I would probably do that if I had an under participating group. While I've been rambling on about that, have any questions come to mind? I know there's some lag, so I'll give you a second on that. Yes, yeah, but what I wouldn't do, so what Caitlin said, well, I guess you can both see it. What I wouldn't do is just post on the first day and then because they don't respond, not ever say anything again, which is what I feel like happened a little bit. I don't remember your situation specifically, but I know with some people in some of the groups, you could tell they wanted to participate. So they made a post and then when no one responded, they're like, oh, and then they didn't do anything. And I on this first one, I treated that as if it was a good faith effort. But really on future ones, on future workshops, a good faith effort, I think, would be logging in, let's say out of the 7 days the workshop's active, at least 4 of them and posting and continuing to be ignored. And like I said, if you did all your pre-writing of ideas on the first day, that's just a question of logging in and copying and pasting. Any other thoughts? Questions? while you think, I'm going to show you a book that you've probably seen me quoting this. I don't know if it mirrors. I don't know how this works. It looks like it's mirrored. This book is called Good Prose. It's by Tracy Kidder and Richard Todd. Okay. So it doesn't need to be mostly about the writer's thinking. And yeah, I think that, no. So the issue that the rest of the class seems to be having is that they're just very vague. If you remember, on the second week, I had a lesson basically about developing a topic that will set you up for success. And what I was saying was that if the topic you have is very vague and very undefined, then when you sit down and try to write, you're gonna have trouble because you haven't given yourself a good set of parameters. And so that's the reason I sort of grade them, not grade as in points, but I define them in tiers of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 4 and 5, ones that are like multiple sentences or even a full paragraph, are ones that are going to lead you down the path of success. So to be like, yeah, she says it'll lead you down the path that rocks, which is a great movie. So, sorry, distractions. Okay, so if what I was seeing a lot of is I want to write about how one decision can change the rest of your life, or something like that. How I want to write about being a cello player or something, and that. So if you're a cello player, and you're a good one, you spent 10,000 hours playing the cello. So you sit down to write and you're like, holy crap, I have 10,000 hours of material to choose from. And it just sets you up. You just can't write. So we'll end up, people will produce papers that start 6 months before the story really starts and ends 6 months after it. And the part that should be the whole paper is 2 paragraphs on page 3. That's the thing that has a tendency to happen if you don't start with a good plan. What your issue seems to be is a little different, and it's really the difficulty that personal essay or reportage, which honestly, if you're not already in a situation to try to do a reportage like that, immediately you're like, oh, this works. This is something like the Barbie thing, for instance. You're like, oh, I'm going to be at a conference this weekend. I can go around and do some interviews. That, unless you're in that situation, you want to just do a personal essay for this assignment. And the issue is, a memoir is more or less a short story. It's like if you were writing fiction, a memoir is a short story that just happens to be true in this case. That's an oversimplification, but that's the bulk of it. A personal essay is something a little different because you've got that memoir element, you're still telling the story, but there's also something that you're trying to sort through. So, for instance, in the example that I gave in the lesson about it, and this is sort of hypothetical, I never actually wrote this essay, but I was imagining, I really do go down to my woods and cut firewood all the time. And just thinking about this one day when I got stuck in the woods and it took me a long, long time to get out. And so what I was doing was I was basically taking that and meshing it up in my mind with other times in my life when I have felt stuck, and keeping at it caused me to get out. So the idea would be that the story it's not a very exciting big story. It's driving down in the woods with the ground's frozen. I drive down, I cut a load of wood, the sun comes up while I'm doing it, it melts the top 1.5 inches of the mud, and suddenly I can't get back out of the woods. And I try to decide whether I want to, drive out of the, just leave the truck, which I have done multiple times, or keep at it and fight and try to get out. And so that's the story. And the thing that's being sorted out is at this point in my personal life where I'm feeling stuck in a career that I'm not very happy with. I went down trying to do one thing, and which, by the way, I'm not at this point in my life right now, which is why I'm comfortable talking about it, is, what do I do? What do I do? And thinking back on times when I felt like that in the past. So you see the whole sorting through of the thing that I'm dealing with doesn't really have a lot to do with the story, except that they have a lot of correlations where they tie together, and one becomes a metaphor for the other. So the truck being stuck becomes a metaphor for feeling stuck in the career. So let's see another example. Well, let's look at the textbook. There goes that phone. So some of the essays. So Stephen Church did the, I'm just getting to the disturbing part. Is this, this is the one. Okay, yeah. So I assigned the, I'm just getting to the disturbing part like last week, I think. This is, so it's a story. It's about like it's a story of him being out with his son. It's been a little while since I read this, so I'm trying to think of the exact details, but he's out with his son, and he has this unreasonable fear, and he tells this story, and then he flashes back and tells another story about a drowning, right? And the story is not just about the drowning or about him out with his son. Is it his son? Regardless, it's really a meditation on like mortality and tragedy, right? So he's telling one story, but he's meditating on this like unreasonable fear and the fear of mortality and drowning, and why do people even die? Why do we lose people? I just rambled for like 10 minutes answering your question. I'm not sure I answered it. Did I hit on the thing that's sort of hemming you up? Because it doesn't have to be mostly about the writer's thinking. Okay, it does. Good. Because I like rambled around back and forth, and I could see that not having helped. And I have to admit that I have not found a good way to explain this assignment online. I'm actually thinking about when I introduce this assignment in the future, just forcing people to do the live stream thing. Be like, hey, look, everybody either needs to come or watch it. Good. I'm glad that helped. I had one person comment. I don't remember if it was either of you comment that they thought that I just meant that a personal essay needs to be about more than one story. That's not what I was getting at all. So if that came across, that's not what I was trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that there's like the story on top, and then there's what's really being dealt with in the background. All right, we have about 5 more minutes before I'm going to cut this off. Was there any other questions that you guys wanted to go over before I go back to that book that I was about to tell you about? Okay. So this book is called Good Prose. It's by Tracy Kidder and Richard Todd. Tracy Kidder wrote some of the essays in your book. at least one of them. He wrote one like Courting the Approval of the Dead. I think that's the name of it. Yeah, Courting the Approval of the Dead. So he is he does reportage for a living. So I've got another book here by him that I'm reading right now called Mountains Beyond Mountains. First 10 pages were great. I don't know what to tell you beyond that. But this one I've actually read. You do not need to use more than one story. No, that's one story is fine. One story is fine. So when I took this class, John Turner, who actually still teaches at Missouri State, taught, yes, you can use more than one. You can use more than one, but you don't have to. When I was trying to find it because I wanted to show an example of the essay. I got into an altercation with some redneck, if I remember correctly, because I can't find the essay, but I think it was like I got in an altercation with some redneck who like screamed at me for riding a bicycle in the road. And then a bunch of other stuff happened, and none of it really was, it was like I cycled somewhere and met up with my Army recruiter because it was back before I joined the Army, and we talked a little bit, and then I went and what did I do? Like bought a kayak, but I didn't take it with me because I was on a bike. I bought it at a garage sale and just left it there. And then I rode my bike to Barnes & Noble, where I bought 2 copies of the fifth Harry Potter book. One of the last 3 Harry Potter books. They'd come out like that day. And then I started to cycle home, and I got like screamed and cussed at again, despite the fact that I was riding exactly in the part of the road where you're supposed to ride. 15 years ago, cycling was not what it is now. It was almost 15 years ago. No, 12 years ago. 12 years ago. And like, I didn't get into an altercation with that person. I sort of smiled and let it go. And the whole point of the essay was like, just sort of meditating on what happened, like in my mind, that would cause me to like want to get in a fist fight with someone at the beginning of the ride, to like having gotten my head a little straighter by the end and being chill about it. Just one story, and the whole thing was basically like, I don't know, how to not road rage, I guess. How to, let stuff happen instead of responding so aggressively. So yeah, it can be one thing. It can be more than one thing. Just as long as it is an actual personal essay. Okay, last try on this. This book, if you're having trouble with nonfiction, I strongly recommend getting a copy of this. The list price is $17. I think I got it for $12 on Amazon. And next time I teach this course, I'm going to go ahead and ask the department if I can just make it required reading. Yeah, parables, true parables. So a lot more Lazarus and a lot less prodigal son. But yeah. So one more time on that. It's called Good Prose: The Art of Nonfiction: Stories and Advice from a Lifetime of Writing and Editing. So, barring any further comments or questions, I don't know about the rest of you. Oh, we got one more person. I don't know about anyone else, but I roll out of bed at 3:45 in the morning, so I think I'm gonna call it quits if there's no other questions. Yep, no worries. One last thing before we do quit. Do you find this useful? Is this something that if we did it 2 or 3 more times in the semester, I know it was only 2 of you that came this time, but is it something you would be interested in doing again that you think would be helpful at strategic points in the semester? And if not, that's fine. No, I won't be offended. Okay, we'll try to schedule another one, and I'll also, once I figure out what the permanent link is for this, I'll post it so that anybody who wasn't able to make it tonight, who wants to see what we talked about, can come in and watch that video. So thanks for coming, and have a good evening. Good night.